one of those transformative concepts in modern business strategy, blue ocean strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you've ever felt like your industry is just this continuous, exhausting battle where everyone is constantly trying to one-up a rival.
Only to end up looking exactly the same.
Exactly. Then this deep dive is specifically for you.
That feeling, that sort of continuous costly battle, that's the core strategic paradox we are here to unpack today. The sources are really clear on this. The harder companies focus on their existing competition, benchmarking every little move and fighting tooth and nail for market share.
The more they just converge.
Precisely. They become strategically indistinguishable. They get stuck in what the authors W. Chang Kim and Renee Mabarian call the red ocean.
And our mission today is to give you the methodology, the analytical tools, and the execution blueprint that allows any organization, I mean, whether you're a scrappy startup or a huge multinational corporation, to systematically escape that bloody competition.
And pursue high-impact, profitable growth in what they call the blue ocean.
We're moving beyond just playing by the fixed market rules. This is about actually reconstructing them.
It is, and it's so vital to begin by understanding the foundational difference between these two environments. It's not just a cute analogy. It's a real philosophical split in how you view the entire market.
Okay.
So, traditional strategy, or what we're calling red ocean strategy, operates from a structuralist view.
A structuralist view, what does that mean exactly?
It means you assume the industry structure is a given. It's fixed. It's unchangeable. There's a specific demand pool out there, and the entire strategic objective is simply to compete in that existing space.
So you're just trying to beat the competition and exploit that existing finite demand.
You've got it. And that forces you into this really painful value-cost trade-off. The game becomes, well, essentially zero-sum. For you to win $1 of market share, a rival has to lose $1.
And the blue ocean strategy just throws that whole idea out the window. It rejects that dogma.
Completely. It adopts what they call a reconstructionist view, which argues that industry structure is not fixed. It can be actively shaped, created, and changed by the players within it.
So the goal isn't just fighting for the demand that's already there.
No, the goal is to make the competition totally irrelevant by creating uncontested market space.
Right.
You shift the game from zero-sum to non-zero-sum. So instead of just fighting over market share, you're creating and capturing entirely new demand, often by bringing in non-customers who were, completely outside the industry before.
And that's how you get to the strategic holy grail.
Value innovation, the thing that finally lets you break that value-cost trade-off.
Okay, so value innovation is the cornerstone here. I think it's critical we get our heads around what it is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, strategy was a choice. If you wanted high value, you had to differentiate. That meant adding features, complexity, services, all things that drive your costs way up.
Or if you wanted low cost, you had to strip out value, which drives your quality and utility down.
It was one or the other.
That forced choice between differentiation and low cost was, it was the conventional dogma for decades. Value innovation just shatters that. It's the simultaneous pursuit of both.
You see that really powerful hourglass visual in the literature?
Exactly. You are driving costs down while at the same time you are driving buyer value up.
That feels almost impossible.
Right.
I mean, how do you actually reconcile those two things at the same time?
The reconciliation happens because you're focused on the right kind of innovation utility for the mass market, and you're eliminating the wrong kind of costs.
The things the industry loves to benchmark, but that the mass market doesn't actually value.
You've nailed it.
So just to be clear, if I just improve my product a little bit, say I figure out a way to lower my production costs by, 2%, is that value innovation?
Absolutely not. That's just incremental value creation. It's good, but it's not a blue ocean move. Value innovation requires a real leap in both utility and efficiency. And conversely, and this is where so many companies get tripped up, value innovation is also not the same thing as technology innovation or just being first to market.
Right, the innovation without value trap. We see so many examples of this. The sources point to the catastrophic failure of Philips's CDI.
The imagination machine?
Yeah, from the 90s.
Oh, it's a perfect case study in what you could call technological hubris. Philips was obsessed with cramming every possible cutting-edge technology into one box. It was a video machine, a music system, a game player, an educational tool.
It was an engineering marvel.
It was, but it was a user nightmare. And it completely failed to align that amazing innovation with utility, price, and cost.
The interface was a mess, the price was way too high, and crucially, it didn't have any simple, attractive software that a mass consumer would actually want to buy.
The managers were just so in love with the technology's bells and whistles. They just assumed that because they could build it, the market would automatically find value in it.
And that assumption is precisely what value innovation is designed to avoid.
It is. The authors really stress that innovation has to be anchored. If you don't anchor it with utility that the mass buyer needs, an accessible price they're willing to pay, and a cost structure that allows you to profit.
Then the tech, no matter how brilliant, just shoots way beyond what the market is ready for.
Motorola's Iridium satellite phone system is another classic one. I mean, unbelievable pioneering technology, but the price point and the complexity level were just things no mass user could ever justify.
So it's like the technology innovators often lay the eggs, but it's the value innovators who figure out the business model to actually hatch them.
That is a great way to put it. The foundation of Blue Ocean strategy is realizing that the aim is to create a leap in value, not just for the buyer, through better utility and a reasonable price, but also a leap in value for the company.
Through an optimal price and cost structure.
Right, and this requires a whole system approach.
Meaning it can't just be a decision made in the marketing department or R&D.
Correct. You can't achieve value innovation by just optimizing one little subsystem, like, say, production innovation or a new sales channel. Those things only reinforce your existing strategic path, whether it's low cost or differentiation.
So a true blue ocean move has to impact the entire company.
The entire firm's activities and internal structure, how you design, how you produce, how you distribute, and critically, how you manage your people. If that whole system isn't aligned to chase both differentiation and low cost at the same time, the move just won't be sustainable. Imitators will catch up way too fast.
Okay, so if value innovation is our North Star, we need the tools to navigate toward it. This has to start with analysis, and the first tool is the strategy canvas. I find this so powerful because it just forces this honest visual confrontation with reality.
It's both a diagnostic tool and an action framework. It shows you where you're currently failing, and it guides you on where you need to go.
So you've got two axes. The horizontal axis lists all the key factors the industry currently competes on and invests in.
Right. Think of it as a list of everything the buyers currently get and have to pay for.
And the vertical axis plots the offering level across those factors. High score means more investment, higher quality, or a higher price.
And when you plot your company and your rivals across these factors, you get this line, the value curve or the strategic profile. And this curve tells you instantly if you are stuck in a red ocean.
How so?
If everyone's curve has roughly the same shape, just at different altitudes, some are high for premium, some are low for budget, that is the visual proof of competitive convergence.
Let's make this concrete with the classic example from the sources. The U.S. wine industry in the late 1990s, it was a huge market, $20 billion in sales, over 1,600 wineries.
And yet they were locked in this brutally competitive war, just suffering from price pressure and totally stagnant demand.
Okay, so what did their strategy canvas look like?
Well, the competition was fierce across 7 standard factors. They competed on price, an elite image, metals, corks, all that esoteric jargon.
Right.
They competed on above-the-line marketing, the need for aging quality, the prestige and legacy of the vineyard, the complexity and sophistication of the taste, tannins, oak, terroir.
All the stuff that intimidates most people.
Exactly. And finally, a wide wine range to cover all the different varietals.
And what was the big insight when you put that on a chart?
The value curves for the premium wines and the budget wines had the same fundamental shape. Premium brands scored high on everything. Budget wines scored low on everything. They were marching in lockstep, differentiating in the exact same way.
So they were just trying to beat each other by spending a bit more on marketing or cutting prices a tiny bit.
A classic zero-sum structuralist fight. The entire industry was obsessed with providing more prestige to the connoisseur, but that connoisseur segment was tiny and it wasn't growing.
So the challenge isn't just to tweak your curve, it's to fundamentally reconstruct it. How do you create a divergent value curve that breaks away? That brings us to the 4 actions framework, the ERRC grid.
The ERRC framework is the tool that forces you to look outside your existing competitive boundaries, to stop benchmarking your rivals. It gives you a systematic, structured way to deliver value innovation by asking 4 key questions.
Let's run through them because this is the real mechanism for getting both differentiation and low cost at once.
Okay, so you start with cost reduction. The first question is, eliminate. Which factors that the industry takes for granted should be completely eliminated? This is the most powerful cost-cutting move because you stop investing entirely.
Okay.
The second is reduce. Which factors should be reduced well below the industry standard? So you keep them, but you radically shrink the investment, cutting costs without killing key utility.
So those two actions, eliminate and reduce, are a direct attack on your cost structure. That's the cost half of value innovation. Now for the other side, driving up buyer value.
The third question is raise. Which factors should be raised well above the industry standard? This is about dramatically elevating the utility points that really matter to the mass of buyers.
And fourth,
Create. Which factors should be created that the industry has never, ever offered? This is what defines the new demand and unlocks new sources of value.
this is where we can apply the framework to that amazing counterintuitive success story of Yellowtail wine.
Yes, the producers, Casella Wines, fundamentally understood something their rivals didn't. The competition wasn't other wineries.
The competition was beer, spirits, and ready-to-drink cocktails.
That's the crucial insight. At the time, those alternatives were capturing 3 times the alcohol sales in the U.S. compared to wine. Casella looked at the mass of non-wine drinkers and just realized the industry had completely alienated them.
By making wine intimidating, pretentious, and way too complicated.
So they reframed the entire problem. The question became, how do we create a fun, approachable, non-traditional wine for absolutely everyone?
And that reframing led them to systematically use the ERRC grid. Let's start with what they eliminated.
They were ruthless. They eliminated every single factor that catered to the connoisseur that the mass public found off-putting. So out went all the enological terminology and distinctions. Words like terroir and tannin were just gone.
Okay.
They eliminated above-the-line marketing, so no expensive mass media campaigns at the start, and this is a huge one. They eliminated the need for aging qualities.
Which means the wine can be consumed right away. From a cost perspective, that's enormous. It gets rid of massive warehousing costs, and it dramatically reduces the working capital cycle.
Right.
You get your money back so much faster.
Precisely. For reduction, they slashed other factors. They reduced the focus on vineyard prestige and legacy. The bottle was about the brand, not the land. They dramatically reduced the wine complexity, creating a simpler, sweeter, fruitier taste that critics hated.
But customers loved because it was so accessible.
And they reduced the wine range from, dozens of types down to just 2 to start with, Chardonnay and Shiraz.
Now, wait a minute. Reducing complexity and only offering 2 types? That seems really counterintuitive. Didn't that risk alienating the few wine drinkers they had? And doesn't that simplicity make it super easy for rivals to just copy the formula?
That's an excellent point, and it gets to the heart of the strategic risk. And yes, they absolutely sacrificed the high-end connoisseur, but that segment was never their target. The simplicity was the utility they were delivering to the non-customer.
To the person who felt overwhelmed by a wall of 50 different labels.
Exactly. By focusing on only 2 reliable, accessible types, they maximize stock turnover and distribution efficiency, which is a huge barrier in that kind of business. The simplicity itself became part of the cost innovation that enabled them to sell in massive volumes.
Okay, so those E&R actions gave them the low-cost structure. To get the differentiation, the R&C steps had to deliver a real leap in value.
They did. They raised the price slightly above the really cheap jug wines to around $6.99, which signaled some quality without being inaccessible. And then, critically, they created entirely new factors. They created easy drinking a wine that didn't require years of acquired taste to appreciate. They created ease of selection with those simple, colorful labels with the kangaroo, and they even used retail ambassadors to help customers choose. And they created a personality, fun and adventure, tapping into that bold, laid-back Australian image.
The result was a value curve that was completely divergent, totally focused, and backed by a clear message. Fun, simple wine for every day. They didn't just steal market share, they grew the whole pie by bringing in millions of non-customers.
And the systematic application of all 4 actions is just non-negotiable for a real blue ocean. That's where the ERC grid itself becomes a necessary tool, like a check on your own strategy.
Why is that check so important?
Because most companies, when they try to innovate, they naturally just gravitate toward the raise and create boxes. They add features, they add services, they add complexity, and then they try to figure out how to pay for it all.
Which leads them right back into the traditional differentiation trap.
Exactly. The ERRC grid forces you to give equal weight to eliminate and reduce, ensuring you're chasing low cost at the same time.
We see that perfect balance in what Cirque du Soleil did for the circus industry. I mean, traditional circuses were dying, stagnant demand, rising costs. The public was losing interest.
And Cirque du Soleil just reconstructed the entire industry from the ground up, borrowing from theater and opera. What did they ruthlessly eliminate? Star performers, the highly paid acts who demanded massive salaries.
Right.
And they eliminated animal acts, which were incredibly expensive to house, feed, train, and transport, not to mention the growing public sentiment against them. They also got rid of the three-ring circus and the aisle concession sales.
That immediately slashes two of the highest cost parts of the traditional circus model. The star salaries and all the animal logistics. What did they reduce?
They reduced the focus on raw thrills and danger. They kept some classic acts, but made them secondary to the story and the artistry. They also reduced the slapstick humor, replacing it with something more sophisticated and elegant.
And for the differentiation side.
They raised the price, shifting it from a cheap family outing to an adult entertainment event, priced like the theater. And they created totally new elements. The sophisticated theme and storyline, the artistic music and dance, and the unique, glamorous venue, the Grand Chapiteau.
So by getting rid of the animal smells and the high-cost stars, they created this clean, adult, sophisticated environment.
And that attracted a whole new customer segment, corporate clients, adult couples, that the traditional circus had completely ignored for decades. They were selling art and narrative under a tent, not just cheap thrills. Their strategy had focus, divergence, and a clear tagline. They just redefined the boundaries of entertainment.
So we have the tools. The strategy canvas diagnoses the problem. ERRC helps solve it. But where do the ideas to populate that grid actually come from? The sources show that innovation isn't random. It follows these systematic patterns.
Right, the 6 paths framework. This is what helps you attenuate the search risk by forcing you to look across conventional industry boundaries. These paths are designed to challenge the implicit assumptions we all make about where our competition really lies.
Okay, let's start with path 1. Look across alternative industries. And this isn't about looking at substitutes, like Coke versus Pepsi. Alternatives are things that have different forms and functions, but serve the exact same objective for the buyer.
A classic example is the objective of business travel. A corporation can choose private jet ownership, which has a super high fixed cost but ultimate speed, or they can use commercial airlines, which have a low variable cost but ultimate hassle.
Right. If you buy a jet, you face huge fixed costs, and the risk is just sitting on the tarmac. If you fly commercial, you suffer enormous variable costs and wasted management time, security lines, overnight stays.
NetJets created fractional jet ownership by looking across those two alternatives and just breaking the trade-off they presented. They eliminated the high fixed cost of ownership entirely. You're just buying a fraction of the jet. And they radically reduced the high variable cost and commercial travel. They offer point-to-point service, they guarantee a jet within 4 hours, and they eliminate deadhead costs, the empty return flights. They dramatically raised the speed and ease of travel. They didn't try to build a better airline. They solved the problem of corporate time and hassle by borrowing the cost structure of one alternative and the speed of the other.
Another brilliant case here is NTT Docomo's iMode, which they launched in Japan way back in 1999. They looked across mobile phones and the emerging internet.
The internet gave you access to information, but it came at a high cost. Expensive PCs, slow dial-up connections, information overload, and a huge customer fear of using credit cards online.
And the mobile phone gave you mobility and ease of use, but very limited functionality.
iMode was this fusion that focused entirely on utility. They eliminated the high PC price and the fear of credit card fraud. They created a unified billing system. All your web services were just billed directly to your monthly phone bill. That instantly removed the security barrier for millions of people.
And they also created a streamlined service.
A single iMode button connected you to this simplified, curated concierge menu of killer apps email, simple entertainment. And crucially, the service was always on, which eliminated that constant, annoying logging on process.
The genius here is that this wasn't really a technological invention. It leveraged existing mobile tech and existing internet content.
They just focused on delivering simplicity and convenience, the core utility, at a price maybe 25% higher than a normal cell phone, but dramatically lower than a PC. And this created the world's first mass-adopted smartphone service years before anyone else.
All right, let's move to path 2. Look across strategic groups. So within any industry, you've got groups that pursue similar strategies, high-end, mid-range, budget. The idea is to look across these groups to find opportunities.
The success of Curve's fitness centers in the U.S. is a perfect example of this. The fitness industry had two very clear strategic groups: High-end traditional health clubs, urban, full amenities, $100 a month or more, catering to everyone.
And on the other end, home exercise programs, low cost, total privacy, zero amenities.
And the sources show that women, who were the mass of non-customers, were stuck between these two. They might trade up to a club for the discipline and motivation, but they resented the cost, the time it took, and the intimidating atmosphere.
Or they'd trade down to a home program for the privacy and time saving, but then they'd often lose the motivation to stick with it.
Curves saw that contradiction. They eliminated all the high-cost, high-intimidation amenities. No pools, no spas, no juice bars, no male presence, and no complex machines. They reduced the workout time to a fast, efficient 30-minute circuit with simple hydraulic equipment that never needed adjusting.
And they created a non-threatening, women-only environment in local strip malls, making it super accessible and fast.
And that cost structure allowed them to charge around $30 a month. They basically took the motivation element from the clubs and merged it with the time-saving, low-cost aspect of home programs. And in doing so, they opened up the market to millions of women who had never joined a gym before.
Okay, that brings us to path 3. Look across buyer groups. Most industries tend to focus on a single buyer group, the user, the purchaser, or maybe an influencer. Shifting that focus can unlock huge hidden demand.
The classic case is Novo Nordisk in the insulin delivery space. For years, the entire industry focused on the doctor, who was the influencer, and doctors just demanded higher and higher purity in the insulin.
So companies were just fighting fiercely over these tiny marginal gains in purity levels.
Novo Nordisk shifted their focus completely to the patient, who was the actual user. And what were the patient's pain points? Complexity and social stigma.
Right. Patients had to carry around vials, syringes, needles. They'd have to fiddle with them in public bathrooms or offices and worry about getting the dose right. It was embarrassing and complex.
Which led to a lot of patients just not complying with their treatment. So instead of competing on marginal purity gains, Novo Nordisk created the NovoPen. It looked like a discrete fountain pen, it was easy to use, it carried a week's supply of insulin, and it had this integrated click mechanism for controlled dosing.
It required minimal dexterity or visibility.
That simple shift in focus, from the doctor's technical demand for purity to the patient's human need for discretion and ease of use, it transformed Novo Nordisk from a simple insulin producer into a global diabetes care leader. They understood the user experience was the primary barrier, not the technical purity of the drug.
Next up, path 4. Look across complementary product and service offerings. This requires you to define the total solution the customer is really seeking. That includes all the activities that happen before, during, or after they use your main product.
Right. The focus often needs to shift away from the price of the core product and onto the long-term cost of the complementary things needed to make it work. Take the ABI bus company in the U.S. transit market. The whole industry competed intensely on getting the lowest initial purchase price for the bus.
But the customers, the municipalities, they keep those buses for 12 years. MBI realized the real strategic challenge wasn't that initial price, it was the maintenance and life cycle costs, which were by far the highest cost elements over those 12 years.
So MBI addressed the complementary problem of maintenance and rust. They designed their buses using advanced fiberglass and composite materials. This was a radical move, but it had multiple benefits. The buses were corrosion-free, which eliminated a ton of preventative body maintenance.
They were also easier and cheaper to repair. No expensive panel replacements.
And they were 30 to 35% lighter, which cut fuel and emission costs dramatically. By focusing on solving the highest overall cost element, that complementary cost of maintenance MBI made their rivals focus on initial purchase price almost irrelevant.
The city was willing to pay a higher upfront price for a drastically reduced cost of ownership over the vehicle's life.
We see this pattern everywhere. I mean, why did Dyson vacuum cleaners become such a blue ocean success, commanding triple the price of rivals? Because they eliminated the cost and annoyance of constantly buying and changing vacuum cleaner bags, the complementary product issue that frustrated every single existing user.
Okay, path 5. Look across functional emotional orientation. This path forces you to challenge the traditional industry definition. Is it functionally driven, focused on utility, price, function, or emotionally driven, focused on image, ritual, and status?
Blue oceans are often found by migrating an industry from one orientation to the other. Look at the Japanese barbershop industry. It was traditionally intensely emotional.
Right, it was a long ritualistic experience with hot towels, massage, tea, small talk. It took an hour or more and cost a lot, like 3,000 to 5,000 yen. The value was in the ritual.
QB House just shattered that. They transformed it into a highly functional industry. They ruthlessly eliminated all the emotional elements, the hot towels, the massage, the tea, the long wait times. They focused purely on the basic functional need, a quick, clean haircut.
And they dramatically reduced the time to just 10 minutes and cut the price to 1,000 yen.
But here's the key financial innovation. By increasing efficiency and volume through this streamlined operation, they even created this innovative air wash system, an overhead hose to vacuum cut hair. They actually managed to increase the hourly revenue earned per barber by nearly 50%.
They offered better hygiene and speed for a mass market, attracting busy professionals who valued time way more than ritual.
Finally, path 6. Look across time. Now, this isn't about gazing into a crystal ball or guessing the next tech fad. It's about identifying trends that are decisive, irreversible, and have a clear trajectory, and then asking, what is the utility barrier preventing people from capitalizing on this trend today?
Apple's iTunes in 2003 is the perfect example. The trend was decisive and irreversible. Digital music distribution, which was being driven by illegal file sharing like Napster. The music industry was trying to fight the trend, but the writing was on the wall.
Apple focused not on the technology of digital music, but on the pain points of the trend. Digital music at the time was illegal, it was inconvenient, often low quality, and it required complex file management.
And they created the first legal, simple, high-quality, convenient platform priced at 99 cents per song.
They leveraged the ubiquity of MP3 technology with the iPod and just focused on utility-superior browsing, music editors, celebrity playlists, and above all, legality and simplicity. They didn't invent the trend, they just developed the viable business model, the new value curve, that unlocked the massive latent demand that the trend had already created. That's the difference between just spotting a trend and actually applying it strategically.
So once we've generated ideas using the 6 paths, and we've tested them with the ERRC framework, we have to move to formulation and planning. This is where so many strategic initiatives just die, not because the idea was bad, but because of planning risk.
Absolutely. You get bogged down in numbers, jargon, and these tiny incremental moves that ultimately just dilute the original vision. The next principle seeks to mitigate that risk by insisting on visualization. Drawing the strategy canvas is central to this.
It helps organizations focus on the big picture, communicate the new strategy, and really harness the collective intelligence of the whole organization.
The sources outline a 4-step visualization process for this. We can use the example of EFS, a struggling corporate foreign exchange business, to walk through how it works.
Okay, what's the first step?
Step 1, visual awakening. The process begins by forcing the executives to draw the as-is canvas for their business compared to their rivals. At EFS, they split managers into 2 teams, one for the traditional offline business and one for their emerging online platform.
And the shock came when they saw their 2 curves were virtually identical to each other and to the competition.
It immediately highlighted 2 massive strategic flaws. First, a severe lack of focus. They were trying to be everything to everyone, which was driving up their costs. And second, their online business, which they were so proud of, was found by an external audit to have one of the slowest websites in the entire industry.
Ouch.
That visual confrontation, seeing their lack of focus and their strategic contradictions just laid bare on a chart, was the jolt they needed. It broke the organizational denial in a way that just reading quarterly performance reports never could.
Okay, so that's the wake-up call. Step 2, visual exploration. This moves from internal diagnosis to external perspective. You go out into the field, using the 6 paths as a guide.
Instead of just interviewing their usual buyers, the EFS teams went out to talk to customers, competitors' customers, and critically, non-customers.
And the findings were transformative.
They were. EFS managers had long prided themselves on their expensive personal account relationship managers. They saw them as a core asset. But the field research revealed that customers often viewed these managers as an Achilles heel.
They were only necessary because EFS was failing to deliver on its basic transactional promises.
They were seen as relationship savers who were just compensating for internal failures, not as sources of primary value. But the real insight, the hidden pain point, came from talking to the accounting departments of their customers.
What did they find?
EFS discovered the factor that customers valued most was speedy confirmation and tracking of transactions. Accounting clerks were wasting enormous amounts of time calling the relationship managers just to confirm if payments had cleared.
So the industry was fighting over price and relationships, but the customers were losing all this time on reconciliation, a classic complementary product issue.
Exactly. EFS realized they were focusing on the wrong problem entirely. They weren't in the business of relationship management. They were in the business of facilitating efficient, predictable corporate accounting.
Okay, which brings us to step 3, the visual strategy fair. The teams take these findings, draw up multiple 2B canvases, and present them to external judges, customers, non-customers.
This fair acts as a crucial filter. It forces managers to step away from their internal silos. At EFS, managers initially had different strategies for online versus offline clients. But the strategy fair showed them that regardless of the channel, all their buyers shared a common set of basic, unmet needs.
Like fast, accurate transaction tracking.
The regional or functional differences only mattered when the basics were already failing. The fair led to a synthesized blue ocean strategy that ignored the internal distinction and focused entirely on those universal high-utility needs.
And that leads to the final step. Step 4, visual communication.
This involves creating and distributing a really stark, clear before and after strategy canvas. The after strategy for EFS became crystal clear. They eliminated the expensive account relationship management, and they reduced investment in physical infrastructure, their highest cost elements.
And they raised security, accuracy, and speed through computerization.
And most importantly, based on that hidden pain point, they created automatic electronic confirmation and payment tracking, basically replicating the simplicity and reliability of a FedEx or UPS tracking system, but for corporate money transfers.
That new divergent value curve wasn't just a vision, it became the project charter. It gave them a clear, compelling tagline. The FedEx of corporate foreign exchange. Easy, reliable, fast, and trackable.
And every single investment decision after that was judged solely on whether it helped bridge the gap between the as-is and the to-be canvas. It ensured focus and minimized that planning risk we talked about.
Of course, a brilliant strategy canvas is worthless if the organization can't execute it. Blue Ocean strategy often requires radical internal change, which triggers 4 major organizational hurdles.
Right, you have the cognitive hurdle, which is denial, the resource hurdle, which is budget, the motivational hurdle, which is morale, and the political hurdle, which is vested interests.
And the traditional approach is just to throw proportional resources at these hurdles. But the sources argue for something called tipping point leadership.
Which focuses on acts of disproportionate influence. This is such a critical distinction. Tipping point leadership says you don't need mass resources or a top-down mandate for every single person. You need to focus strategically on the people, acts, and resources that have an outsized impact on performance and change.
The textbook example here is the transformation of the New York Police Department under Commissioner Bill Bratton in the mid-1990s. He faced this monumental task: rising crime that everyone thought was impervious to police intervention, a frozen budget, and just abysmal morale.
First, he had to tackle the cognitive hurdle breaking the denial. Bratton knew that just reciting crime statistics was useless, so instead, he forced his top police brass to ride the electric sewer, the subway system.
To come face-to-face with the rampant crime, the vandalism, the anarchy that citizens were facing every single day.
That experiential shock was immediate, and it was inescapable. It turned abstract numbers into a visceral reality, and it instantly broke the cognitive resistance that the leadership had built up from working safely behind their desks. Seeing the chaos made the need for radical change totally concrete.
Okay, next, the resource hurdle. How do you get radical gains with a frozen budget?
Bratton just rejected the idea that fighting crime required a proportional increase in officers. He used focused redistribution. First, he identified the hotspots, a few specific precincts and subway lines where the vast majority of crime was happening, and he reallocated officers from these widespread, ineffective patrols to those crucial high-impact zones.
And just as important, he addressed the cold spots, the areas of inefficiency that were draining resources.
Officers were wasting an average of 16 hours just processing even petty arrests at central headquarters. Bratton freed up those high-value officer resources by creating buses, mobile processing centers that could rapidly complete paperwork, getting the officer back on patrol as quickly as possible.
That redistribution, with no new budget, gave them a massive boost in police presence right where it mattered most. That is disproportionate resource influence.
Then came the motivational hurdle. How do you motivate 36,000 officers who are deeply cynical and totally wedded to the status quo?
You focus on the kingpins.
Exactly. Bratton focused on the 76 precinct commanders who controlled the entire force through command structure and influence. And he used fishbowl management, which was embodied by the biweekly CompStat meetings.
CompStat was revolutionary. Commanders had to stand up in front of their peers and superiors, use computer-generated maps and charts, and explain their precinct's crime performance or lack thereof.
This created immediate transparency and accountability. It leveraged peer pressure, it recognized high performers publicly, and it made the stakes of inaction painfully clear. And by atomizing the challenge, breaking the huge goal down into block by block, precinct by precinct, he made the seemingly insurmountable goal feel attainable.
He turned cynical staff into active collaborators.
And finally, the political hurdle. Opposition from vested interests like City Hall, the unions, the courts. Bratton secured a respected insider, a consigliere, John Timoney in this case, who knew all the organizational landmines and could build the necessary coalitions.
Timoney's role was crucial. He aligned external stakeholders, the mayor, district attorneys, jail managers, to overcome court opposition that was afraid the new focus on quality-of-life crimes would just overwhelm the judicial system.
By managing those political dynamics proactively, Bratton ensured the new strategy wasn't sabotaged from the outside. The whole application of tipping point leadership allowed this massive Fersen organization to execute a radical strategic shift rapidly and effectively.
This whole execution challenge brings us to Principle 6. Building execution into strategy through fair process. When you're implementing a major blue ocean shift, you're inherently asking people to change their behavior. That creates huge management risk, distrust, non-cooperation, even sabotage.
Fair process is the methodology for mitigating this risk. It rests on the 3 E's, and when all 3 are present, people give their willing cooperation and trust, even if they don't fully agree with the outcome.
So the 3 E's are: 1, engagement, which is involving affected people in the strategic decisions.
2 is explanation, clearly explaining the rationale behind the final decisions and why the change is necessary.
And 3 is expectation clarity, stating the new performance standards, the metrics, and the consequences for success or failure.
The sources illustrate the power of this principle with the contrast between 2 plants at the Elko Manufacturing Company. Both were trying to implement cellular manufacturing. At the Chester plant, the manager was frequently absent, there was no explanation given for the change, and rumors started spreading that consultants were there to plan downsizing.
The result was total failure. The employees felt what the authors call emotional indignation. They felt disrespected, and intellectual indignation. They felt their operational knowledge was being ignored.
They actively refused assignments and sabotaged the process. It led to a massive drop in performance and just total disorder. They had the knowledge, but they refused to use it.
And conversely, the High Park plan, which had a strong union known for resistance, succeeded dramatically.
Why? Because management held plant-wide meetings, they openly discussed the competitive pressure, they explained the necessity of the shift to break away from rivals, and they offered clear expectation clarity on the new roles and performance metrics.
The manager validated the employees' practical knowledge through engagement, asking for their input on the implementation.
That built trust, and it turned potential resistors into active collaborators, allowing the Blue Ocean operational shift to succeed incredibly fast.
This failure to use fair process is so often why sophisticated systems fail.
It is. The sales force at Lubber, for example, sabotaged a new coolant expert system. It wasn't because the AI didn't work. It was because they hadn't been engaged. They saw the system as a replacement for their value, their years of proprietary knowledge, and they expressed their indignation by undermining the data.
And this principle isn't just for internal staff. It's for external stakeholders, too.
The massive cost escalations and schedule delays for the F-35 fighter jet program, despite its advanced technology, were rooted in poor execution because of a lack of fair process. There was minimal engagement and unclear expectations with that complex web of subcontractors and international partners.
That leads us to the final principle for sustained success, Principle 7, aligning value, profit, and people propositions. A strategy is only sustainable if these 3 elements align in the pursuit of both differentiation and low cost.
This provides the organizational defense against imitation. If a rival tries to copy your value proposition, what you offer buyers, they also have to align their company to your specific profit proposition and your people proposition.
Let's look at the UK charity Comic Relief. They operate in the super competitive, fragmented charity sector.
Their value proposition for donors is simple, cheap, easy, fun giving. You buy a £1 Red Nose or you sponsor silly antics instead of writing a big check.
Their profit proposition is a hyper-efficient, low-cost structure that maximizes the surplus. They got that low cost by eliminating the most expensive parts of charity, work, costly fundraising galas, mass mailings, grant writing.
And they leveraged existing retail infrastructure, like supermarkets selling the red noses, and, critically, they promised the golden pound that 100% of all donations go directly to the causes.
And this is where the alignment becomes unbreakable. The people proposition is the key barrier to imitation. Corporate sponsors, volunteers, celebrities, they all volunteer eagerly because comic relief's differentiated value proposition triggers enormous amounts of free press.
They often get over 200 hours of free national television time. This free publicity is a massive win-win for the companies and celebrities involved, and it creates this army of stakeholders who are eager to reinforce the low-cost, differentiated model. The whole system is self-reinforcing and extremely difficult to copy.
And conversely, the famous failure of the Tata Nano perfectly illustrates the danger of misalignment. They had a compelling value proposition, a safe all-weather car priced against two-wheelers.
And a strong profit proposition, with radical cost innovation through that two-cylinder aluminum engine and simplified design.
But the project failed its initial goals because the people proposition for a critical external stakeholder group, the Singir community landowners in West Bengal, was violated over the land acquisition process.
That political and relational misalignment led to a massive facility relocation and just dampened all the initial momentum. It proves that even the best blue ocean idea can sink if you ignore the external people and political dynamics.
And finally, even the most successful blue oceans eventually attract imitators. You have to constantly monitor your value curve. When that curve starts converging with your rivals again, it's time to value innovate again.
It requires dynamic renewal. Salesforce.com, for instance, created a blue ocean in CRM by offering a web-based subscription solution, which made traditional packaged software irrelevant for small and medium-sized businesses.
But as competitors converged on that model, Salesforce didn't just sit there.
They continuously renewed. They launched Force.com and AppExchange, allowing custom cloud-based apps and later Chatter for private social networking. They just kept maintaining a divergent value curve to stay ahead of the convergence.
So what does this entire systematic framework really mean for you, the listener?
I think the core message is that Blue Ocean strategy isn't about a single great marketing idea or some creative flash of genius. It's a holistic, disciplined system. Sustainable success requires that three-way alignment: a compelling value proposition to attract buyers, a viable profit proposition to ensure profitability, and a mobilized people proposition to ensure committed execution.
And we have to remember the ethical and economic implication here. Blue Ocean strategy is fundamentally about non-destructive creation.
It's not about finding a slightly better, lower-cost solution to an existing problem, which often just triggers painful displacement and destruction of rivals. It's about redefining the strategic problem itself. And by doing that, creating new aggregate demand, new wealth, and actually expanding the economic pie.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. If you look at the successful history of these moves, from the Ford Model T to NTT Docomo to Cirque du Soleil, they were rarely driven by technological breakthroughs alone.
They were driven by shifts in thinking about basic utility, price, and simplicity.
Which leads to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. Take a critical look at your own industry or your own product. If you ruthlessly strip away all the organizational complexity, the industry jargon, the high-cost bells and whistles that your competitors are benchmarking against, what remains?
And how does what remains offer a simple, dramatic leap in utility for the massive buyers, not just for the industry connoisseur? That laser focus on utility, not just technology, is the true engine for creating uncontested market space.